Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully it can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com and I'll try to get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today's show, we're going to be talking about Scotch again, and more specifically, we're talking about islands, the maritime character that is beyond Isla. The cargo ship SS Politician is fighting Atlantic storms as she makes her way to Jamaica and New Orleans. In her hold, 264,000 bottles of premium Scotch whiskey, liquid gold during wartime rationing when good whiskey was nearly impossible to find. This is what is unique about island communities. They see opportunity where others see disaster. When the SS Politician ran aground off to Hebridean Island off of Eriskay, local islanders didn't see a maritime tragedy. They saw providence. Within hours, small boats appeared from neighboring islands as word spread through the Hebrides like wildfire. The cargo manifest read like a whiskey lover's dream: White Horse, Ballantines, rare single malts, all destined for American millionaires while Scottish folks went without. What followed was pure Highland ingenuity. Locals rescued thousands of bottles from the sinking ship, claiming that they were preventing good whiskey from being lost to sea. And when customs officers came hunting for the contraband, the islanders proved that necessity truly is the mother of invention. Bottles disappeared into peat bogs, church crypts, and fake walls built into the houses overnight. One clever fellow hid bottles in his wife's knitting basket, while another created a false bottom in his boat's fish hold. The cat and mouse game between authorities and islanders became the stuff of legends. This story captured the imagination so completely that Compton Mackenzie turned it into Whiskey Galore, celebrating Highland resourcefulness over bureaucratic authority. But what gets me about this tale isn't just the cleverness, it's what it reveals about the cultural importance of whiskey during hard times. In 1987, diver Donald McPhee recovered 8 bottles from the wreck's site, which sold at auction in 2013 for roughly £12,000. These politician bottles represent more than rare whiskey. They're artifacts of island culture, wartime resilience, and the lengths people will go to preserve their liquid heritage. Today, we're exploring Scotland's Maritime Islands, beyond Isla, where that same spirit of independence and authenticity continues to shape extraordinary whiskies, from Highland Park's Norse heritage to Loch Lomond's innovative production. These are distilleries that refuse to compromise their vision, no matter what the spreadsheets say. Now, welcome to Scotland's Maritime Islands. And once you understand what isolation and independence can create, you'll never look at whiskey the same way. These island distilleries have turned geographic challenges into competitive advantages. Remote locations where shipping costs are brutal, weather can cut you off from the world for days, and every decision requires self-reliance. Yet somehow these constraints have produced some of the most distinctive, memorable whiskeys on Earth. These islands don't just make whiskey. They create liquid stories, every single element of their maritime environment, from ancient peat formed over a millennia to salt air that penetrates warehouse walls, contributes all of this to flavors as unique as human DNA. Salt air doesn't just add to the hint of brine to the final product, it changes how whiskey matures, affecting everything from evaporation rates to wood extraction. Those legendary storms, they can keep ferries away for days. They're also going to be driving atmospheric pressure changes that influence how whiskey breathes in the cask. And then there's the cultural element. That really impresses some people. Island distilleries often developed in complex isolation, completely creating house styles without outside influences. These independence-fostered houses create innovation and preserve traditional techniques that mainland distilleries abandon for efficiency. Many still use the same equipment and methods dating back generations, not from nostalgia, but because isolation demanded they perfect what worked. Each distillery has found its own interpretation of these shared maritime elements. Highland Park and Orkney channels Norse heritage and heather peat into balanced complexity. Loch Lomond demonstrates how lakeside conditions can create maritime character even inland. Each tells its own story through the whiskey. But it's not just about tradition. These distilleries are pushing boundaries in ways that industry assumptions will be challenged. From Highland Park's continued floor malting to Loch Lomond's unique still configurations, they're proving that innovation doesn't require abandoning what makes you special. This diversity within shared identity is what makes Scotland's islands so compelling. It's not about following a regional playbook, so to speak. It's about understanding how place shapes flavor, how tradition enables innovation, and how authentic character creates lasting value. Tonight, we're going to be tasting 4 expressions that showcase this range, each telling part of the story of how maritime Scotland continues to influence whiskey character in the 21st century. Our featured whiskeys tonight will be Maclean's Nose Blended Ardnamurchan at Adelphi Distillery. It's a 92 proof coastal Highland blend. And then we'll have Loch Lomond, a Benny's single barrel at 117.8 proof at 11 years. This is a Highland maritime character pour. And then Highland Park single cask series from the Whiskey Exchange at 117.8 proof, 16 years. This is the same distillery, but a different cask selection. And then finally, Highland Park Glasgow, 127 proof, 13 years. Strength, Orkney, power. How do you create a whiskey that tastes like ancient history while remaining utterly modern? Highland Park has mastered this paradox for over 200 years, and their story reveals something profound about the relationship between place, culture, and flavor. Highland Park's founding in 1798 is attributed to either Magnus Ianson or David Robertson, with some uncertainty in the historical record. Located in Kirkwall, Orkney, Highland Park sits on Scotland's northernmost whiskey-producing islands, closer to Bergen, Norway than London. However, the geographic claim could require some verification. This extreme northern location creates environmental conditions that influence every aspect of whiskey production. Magnus Ianson embodied the romantic spirit of early whiskey production. He was simultaneously the local church officer and an illegal distiller who allegedly hid his still beneath the church pulpit. Legend says he conducted Sunday services above his hidden operation, creating the perfect cover for his illicit activities. Highland Park has embraced Orkney's Norse heritage as more than marketing. For over 600 years, Viking ruled these islands, leaving cultural DNA that influences Highland Park's identity today. This isn't superficial branding, it reflects a genuine understanding of how Norse values shaped Orcadian character. Norse culture valued both warfare and craftsmanship, aggression and patience, power and subtlety. Highland Park's whiskeys reflect this duality perfectly. Robust island character balanced with elegant complexity that rewards contemplation rather than demanding attention. Highland Park maintains traditional floor maltings, making them one of the few remaining Scottish distilleries still malting their own barley. The exact count varies by source and should be verified, obviously, but workers hand turn the germinating barley with wooden shields in techniques unchanged for centuries. This isn't nostalgia, it's quality control at a most granular level. They've preserved these methods not because they're old, but because they create irreplaceable flavors. The heather peat they burn produces honey sweet smoke that complements rather than dominates other flavors. This creates Highland Park's signature balance between smoke and sweetness that distinguishes them from more aggressive island styles. Orkney's climate creates unique maturation conditions that mainland distilleries spend fortunes trying to replicate. Extreme weather variations, temperature swings, moderated by the Gulf Stream, and seasonal light changes that range from nearly 24-hour summer daylight to winter darkness. These create natural temperature cycling that gently accelerates flavor development. The water comes from the Caddy spring, flowing through ancient Orkney sandstone and picking up subtle mineral notes that complement the whiskey's complexity without overwhelming delicate flavors. It's terroir in its truest sense. Environmental factors that cannot be replicated elsewhere. Our Highland Park Glasgow at 127 proof shows the distillery's raw power at cask strength. This reveals additional complexity, more intense honey sweetness, deeper smoke character, and maritime influences that emerge only at natural strength. The single cask series from Whiskey Exchange demonstrates how individual cask selection creates unique expressions within the house style. At 117.8 proof and 16 years old, it shows optimal aging for Highland Park character, old enough for integration, young enough for vibrancy. Loch Lomond tells a story of how apparent limitations can become extraordinary strengths. When people think maritime whiskey, they picture coastal distilleries, but Loch Lomond proves that innovation in geography can create maritime character even inland. Located in Alexandria, straddling the Highland boundary fault that officially separates the lowlands from the highlands, Loch Lomond occupies a unique position in Scottish whiskey geography. The distillery sits on Scotland's largest freshwater loch, creating microclimate conditions that influence whiskey maturation in surprising ways. Large bodies of water moderate temperature swings, create humidity variations, and contribute atmospheric influences that affect how whiskey develops in the cask. It's not quite the same as Atlantic exposure, but it creates similar effects, consistent conditions that promote steady, complex flavor development. Loch Lomond has a systemic approach to exploring whiskey's possibility. Loch Lomond operates one of Scotland's most versatile production facilities, featuring 3 distinct types of stills: traditional swan neck pot stills, unique straight neck pot stills, and a rectifying plate, and then a continuous column still. This unprecedented flexibility enables them to produce everything from light grain whiskeys to heavily peated malts. The straight neck pot stills are particularly remarkable. They can produce a spirit up to 90% ABV compared to the traditional pot stills 70% ABV. This allows extraordinary control over the flavor separation and concentration, creating multiple distinct spirit styles from the same raw materials. Our Benny's single barrel represents something special when knowledgeable retailers work directly with innovative distilleries to identify exceptional casks. Benny's Beverage Depot in Chicago worked with Loch Lomond to select barrels that showcase the distillery's potential beyond standard releases. At 117.8 proof, after 11 years, this barrel retains significant strength, indicating excellent cask quality and optimal aging conditions. It demonstrates how Highland lakeside influences can create fresh, clean fruit and honey notes with subtle mineral complexity. Loch Lomond challenges assumptions about what creates great whiskey. They prove that innovation doesn't require abandoning tradition, it requires understanding why traditional methods work and finding new ways to achieve similar results. Their multiple still types aren't gimmicks. They're tools for creating specific flavor profiles that would be impossible otherwise. Sometimes the most interesting whiskeys come from unexpected partnerships. McLean's Nose represents a collaboration between a Delphi distillery and Ardnamurchan distillery, independent bottling expertise meeting innovative coastal production. Ardnamurchan distillery sits on Scotland's westernmost mainland point, where the Atlantic weather creates dramatic environmental conditions. This isn't just scenic, it is functional. The peninsula's isolation and exposure to maritime climate contribute distinctive character that appears even in young spirits. The coastal location provides pure water sources, dramatic weather variations, and salt air influence that creates unique maturation conditions. These environmental factors contribute to character development in ways that demonstrate how terroir affects whiskey regardless of production style. Adelphi's involvement brings decades of independent bottling expertise to the blending process. Their approach emphasizes flavor development over commercial considerations, creating blends that showcase rather than mask individual component qualities. At 92 proof, this blend maintains enough strength to carry complex flavors while remaining accessible. The Highland coastal character shows through fresh maritime-influenced notes that complement traditional Highland fruit spice characteristics. Before we dive into our tasting, let's talk about our delivery system tonight, because how we experience these whiskeys is just as important as what we're experiencing. I'm always fascinated by how the different glassware shapes our perception of what we're drinking. Tonight's setup, I'm using a standard Glencairn glass for this exploration, those tulip-shaped vessels that have become the gold standard for whiskey tasting. With tonight's diverse lineup, from cask-strength Highland Park to innovative Loch Lomond, glass choice becomes particularly important. Now, why this matters? The design isn't accidental. That wide bowl allows whiskey to breathe and develop, while the tapered rim concentrates aromas for maximum impact. For our higher proof expressions tonight, this concentration could be intense, but it also means we won't miss subtle maritime notes that get lost in a wider glass. With both Highland Park expressions coming in at over 117 proof, the glass's shape will help us manage that alcohol heat while capturing the complex honey and smoke interplay that defines these whiskeys. The key is patience, letting these spirits open up rather than rushing the experience. Our Loch Lomond at 117.8 proof represents an interesting challenge. This innovative whiskey from unique stills and the Glencairn should help us detect how these different production methods translate to aroma and flavor. The concentrated delivery might reveal subtleties that showcase why our still configuration matters. The McLean's nose at 92 proof should be the most approachable in the Glencairn, enough strength to carry complex flavors without overwhelming alcohol presence. This should let us appreciate how thoughtful blending can enhance rather than diminish individual component qualities. And what excites me about tonight's approach is the opportunity to taste how different interpretations of maritime whiskey making show up in the glass. Can we detect the difference between the coastal Atlantic influence and the lakeside Highland character? Will Highland Park's Heather Peat present differently than we expect? The Glencairn should help us answer these questions. We're going to start with McLean's Nose, blended Ardent Merchant at Adelphi. This is 92 proof. This is our most approachable expression, a gentle introduction into maritime character without overwhelming the palate. The nose on this gives me salted caramels and something green, maybe grass, maybe field, maybe leaves, something along that lines. The palate feels a little bit thin, and then there's a spritz-like situation, maybe some lemon, maybe some citrus. And then as it starts to finish out, you get a little smoky apple, but it's not really smoky. There's a little bit of spice on the tongue, and it's maybe just a little bit ashy. Next up, we're going to have the Loch Lomond Benny's Single Barrel at 117.8 proof and set at 11 years. The proof and complexity should step up here. There's some influences that we expect to be in place. The nose on this gives me a smoky banana custard and something slightly mildly acidic. The palate is like a grassy mango. And then as it finishes, it gets a little peppery, a little tropical, a little bit of vanilla to it. Overall, a very interesting pour. Next up, we have Highland Park Single Cask Series. And this is the Whiskey Exchange at 117.8 proof and 16 years. This is, Orkney's elegant complexity. Same distillery, but we're going to demonstrate how an individual cask selection can create unique expressions here. The nose on this comes across as overly sweet tea. It's a little bit jammy, a little bit decadent. Overall, I'm really excited to see what this does on the palate. The palate is a spicy red fruit, maybe some nuts. Then it finishes like a sweet red wine, but not like a cheap sweet red wine, and it's a more fuller, jammier fruit type red wine. And next we'll have the Highland Park Glasgow. This is the 127 proof 13 year. This should be the most intense expression that we have through the tasting. This is raw Highland Park power at cask strength. That one stings the nostril a little bit. There's a slight burn to it, but it does lean into like a slightly burned caramel flavor. It's dark, rich, sugary, maybe some spice, maybe some raisin in here. And then the palate on this it's drying immediately. It goes spicy and buttery. And then as it finishes out, you get some oak and some smoke and some dryness and some pepper. What strikes me the most about tonight's journey through Scotland's Maritime Islands is how these expressions demonstrate that there's no single way to interpret island character. From Highland Park's Norse heritage to Loch Lomond's innovative production, each distillery has found its own authentic voice within the shared maritime influences. These whiskeys prove that authenticity cannot be manufactured elsewhere. Salt air, unique water sources, cultural heritage, and determination of people who refuse to compromise their vision. These things create irreplaceable character that speaks to specific traditions and places. The contrast between Highland Park's balanced complexity and Loch Lomond's technical innovation demonstrates how different approaches can create different interpretations of maritime influence. Each expression tonight showed unmistakable DNA from its location and maintains its individual personality, of course. What unites all of these whiskeys is their genuine connection to place and the passionate people who make them. This is why island whiskey continues to captivate. It's not just about the liquid in the bottle, but the stories, traditions, and innovations that make each drop possible. Thanks for tuning in to this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if at all possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using Embellish Pod, and you can give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com. It's all of my links, accounts, and contact details are over there. Thanks for stopping by.